32HN8. Where we were last left off, we were discussing the CPI and the weightings. The weightings. Oh my word, the weekend, the weightings. Yes, we're always waiting for the weekend. The weighting in the USA and India, and we were discussing whether we thought, why we thought they might be different, and we talked about all sorts of different possible ideas, right, as to why they might be different, including different cultural understandings, different income levels, expectations, different consumption decisions, etc. Right, so let's have a bit of a look now at this idea of a consumer price index again. A bit more depth here. The consumer price index has what's called a base year. And I think we've talked about base years before. I'm trying to remember if we have. Right? Base years, that's your starting point, your comparison. Right? So you have a starting point, and then from there on, that's what you're comparing everything to. So you're comparing it to your base year. All right. So when we talk about the CPI, we have a base year of 100, which is quite useful because 100 is, well, it's the percentage that you can then gauge things with. So in 2001, the price level increased by 8.1% in the country that we are given here. By 2009, it was 86.3% higher than in the year 2000. Right? Doesn't mean it's gone up necessarily 86% like the prices, but the actual index is 86% higher. Right? So working this out, you can see you've got base years, you're going to have percentages, so percentage change. You're going to do comparisons one year to the next, and you're going to have potentially data in tables and or graphs that you're going to need to identify what the answer is. So what was the level in 2003? What is the percentage change between 2003 and 2004? Those sorts of mathematical applications are what potentially need to be asked in the future. So let's have a think. Therefore, if we're going to get the rate of inflation in a year, we need to calculate the percentage change between the CPI for the previous year and the one for the current year. All right. So we remember percentage changes, good old maths, right? Always rears its head. Here we go. The inflation rate 2009 was 4.8%. How did we work it out? Well, we worked out the difference between the two numbers, divided it by the original number, and multiplied it by 100. So that approach is how I learnt the percentage change approach. Now, you may have a more fancy mathematical way of doing it than that, but that's how I learnt it. Difference over original times 100 over 1. All right, and 4.8% is what we end up with. So 2009, wherever 2009 is now on the diagram here. All right, so 186.3 minus 177.8 divided by 177.8, hopefully I've done the maths right on this, times 100 equals 4.8%. Now that calculation is an application that you're deriving the information from a model as opposed to from a table or from words just written there. So there's quite a lot of application involved with it, but the actual answer is actually quite straightforward. So in your paper 2, when you're doing calculations with regards to inflation, this is the sort of idea that you can get. And it could be worth potentially up to 4 marks because of the level of depth in a way that you're having to do with regards to calculations. All right. How did you calculate the inflation rate again? So just explain the process. Oh, Sariha's here. How are you, Sariha? Are you here? Your name's on the list. Not here. Okay, your name's just on the list. How have you done that? Okay. All right. Sorry, team. Difference between 2 years over the original year. Okay. Difference between 2 years over the previous year. All right, that's a little bit imprecise there, Max, but okay. Change in inflation rate over the base rate as a percentage. Yeah, okay, hopefully you understand how that works. That would confuse me. Change in CPI over CPI times 100, okay. Percentage after, percentage before times 100. You've got percentages in there too, by the way, just saying. If it's a CPI figure that we're using, the CPI isn't actually a percentage. It's just the CPI. It's an index. It's a price index. You can use the price index to work out the percentages. New inflation minus old inflation divided by old inflation. Yeah, probably better to just use the term CPI in your explanations. Difference over original times 100. 100 difference equals final value minus, oh, I see. Whew, wow, I hope you worked that one out there, Arena. It looks very complicated. 2 years over original year, 100 onions, and that's better. Now, I'd add the difference of the CPIs. Subtract the base year CPI by the present year CPI, then divide by the base year and multiply by 100. Good. Very good, Fatima. Well done. Seon, you work out how to do it. Joel, Kendrick, you in there? Have a go. How do you calculate the inflation rate? There is a little bit of a cheat way as well, by the way. I say cheat way, I'm not saying that you're cheating doing it. I'm saying that there's a bit of a quick way to remember it. Yeah, well done, Sharaf. That's exactly right. Darwin, having a go? Let's wait a couple more seconds for a couple of others to have a go. Okay. Did we have Joel? I'm losing people. No, we don't have Joel. Where did Joel go? Do we not have Darwin either? I thought we did. No Darwin. Okay. All right. Well done, team. As said, the idea being that there's the percentage change in the CPI. So you're working out the percentage change in the CPI. So 1 year to the next, from the base year to the current year, however you like to explain that. but it's just working out the percentage change in the CPI. Now, things that we can think of. Now, this is to do with how you explain inflation. And because you're going to read about it in news articles, because you might read about it in, say, things like the Economist magazine or economics blogs or political statements or the actual releases that the people like the Reserve Bank, the central banks, will put out into the public. Some of the terminology that they use might be a little bit more complicated, so we might need to just double check that we are familiar with them. So we're going to talk about two different types measures of inflation, right? So the first one is called core inflation. That's when inflation happens and you say, oh, core. No. Core inflation is products that have a very volatile price and they're left out, right? So we don't include those ones, right? So core inflation is just the main staple goods that you have, everyday sorts of prices of goods and services that are important, right? Ones that are very volatile, that go up and down and up and down and up and down, they're not included in the core inflation, right, measure. Then if we were to think about what we report on, we tend to report on what's called headline inflation. So if you're familiar with terminology to do with the news, you will have heard about the headlines, right? Which isn't somebody who's, needing some Botox work or whatever it is, right? Headlines, okay? That's the main indicator, if you will, of inflation that you will see in the news, the media. We will report on this one. This is the basket of all of the goods consumed, and it will include all of those volatile prices within it. It's the one that tends to get reported on, okay? Hence the phrase headline inflation. So here we've got the price of oil. Here we've got the price of food. And again, you can see the volatility in these. This one, particularly at the moment, food price inflation around the world is a bit of a concern. And then here we've got energy prices in red and core inflation is actually blue. So if we see the blue line here, there's your core inflation. All right, and there's energy prices. Okay, so by excluding all this, you actually get a much more stable rate of inflation. Now, you can make arguments about whether this is an accurate thing then. You can, the TOK-ness of the use of the data. Are we actually measuring inflation if we are excluding the items that are the most volatile? Okay. Now, when I say excluding, yes, we're excluding them, but we're excluding them in that measure. Okay. They are in the headline inflation. They're just not in the core inflation. So when politicians are going to talk about inflation, some of them will be actually talking about core inflation. Other politicians will be referring to headline inflation. So it is quite important that we know what the difference between the two is, because they can actually be talking about two different things. All right. So if you're a politician and you're looking at this blue line, you're probably going, oh yeah, no problem, mate. She'll be right. Yeah, look at that. If you're a politician and you're including all of this headline inflation, oh, look at that. Whoa, right? Danger zone, right? So it will mean different things, and therefore it will have policy implications, right? Which is a good thing to discuss in an exam. What is the difference between core inflation and headline inflation? Well, here you go. Darwin, you here now? Excellent. Good to see you. And Joel T, have you arrived? Very Brilliant. All right, so we can do that. And that. Let me know if Sariha arrives. I haven't seen her so far. All right, what are we coming up with? Difference between core inflation and headline inflation. Left out, yes. Well done, Ariane. Good work, Max. Very, very concise. Yeah, okay, Winhoward. Yeah, a little bit imprecise with your definition of core inflation or your explanation of core inflation there. A little bit imprecise, but good. Well done, Hayan. Very good. Andri. Oh, interesting, Andrew. Well done. Good way to explain it. Kendrick, did we have Kendrick? Yes. Are you there, Kendrick?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you. Inflation does not include products with volatile price. Well done. Yeah, it's all goods consumed. It's the basket, right? It's that CPI basket. But yes, very good. Wow, well done, Sayon. That looks good. Perhaps a little Dr. Googly, but very good. All right, if you can put that in your notes, that would be good. And make sure that you understand that one. That would be very good. So raw inflation figure. So what does it mean to be raw? A raw inflation figure. Reported through the CPI, yes. Released monthly by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the idea of a Bureau of Labor Statistics, it isn't called that in every single country. It's obviously called that in one particular country, probably America. America likes its bureaus. Core inflation, change in prices, goods and services, except those from the food. Yes, and the idea about that is that's the volatility of it, that the prices change rapidly. So you are excluding them from that particular measure. Good, and remember the point of all of this is that it's going to lead to essentially two different types, if you will, or measures of inflation. And from that, therefore, there is going to be distinct differences in what policy decisions you might make, dependent on whether you're looking at core inflation or the headline inflation. And because the headline inflation is the one that's reported, that tends to be the one that gets discussed the most often. Dim, dim, dim. And here's a closed gap exercise. Away you go. There it is. Good work, Ensign. Good work, Fatima. Oh, look at the numbers. Well done. Oh, let's see what we can do. Come on, team. Okay, good work. Waiting on a couple more. Oh, yeah, good. Just a couple more. Haven't had a go yet. Good work, Kendrick. Hayan, Dawan. Go, fill in blanks. I can't see my screen. That's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Maybe you can now. All right, Hayan, you having a go? Or we lost.
Yeah, I did.
You did? Okay. All right. Okay. Well done, team. Inflation is an increase in the price level. Deflation was a decrease in the price level. Disinflation was when the price level was increasing, but by less than it used to, which is the same as a decrease in inflation. Inflation is measured using the CPI, measured around a basket of goods and services. The goods included are a representation of those that are bought by consumers. They have weights attached to them. The base year in the index has always been the number 100. You've got core inflation, where the headline inflation is adjusted by removing goods with volatile prices. People will have less purchasing power unless their income increases, and real prices are nominal prices that have been adjusted for inflation. Good work, team. Right, here we go. In 2013, so I know a little while ago, the economy, we're saying America, experienced an increase in the price level by 2%. In 2014, the same number was just 1%. What's happened? Good work. What's happened? Joel D. Yeah, having a thought there? Ian, it's not registering your answers. All right. Oh, I had a bling blong. All right. Now, here's the thing. We had an increase in price level by 2%. Right? Then we had the next year, 2014, the number was only 1%, so we got to call that disinflation. Disinflation. Which of these is true? A, B, C, or D? Have a go. Bet you didn't think you were going to be tested on these sorts of things first thing on a Friday morning. Interesting. All right, well done, team. The majority of us got this one correct. Well done. So, deflation was when the price level was decreasing. Well done. Very good. Which goods? What's the English on that? What goods are included in the CPI? There we go, A, B, C, or D. Okay, waiting on a couple more. Right, now, again, the majority of you have done that really well. Now, I did think that if I'm sharing my window, you're probably able to see the correct answer as you put the thing in. So I apologize for that. But anyway, a little bit of a quiz, so it's not a huge deal. What goods are included in the CPI? Goods that are bought by the domestic consumers. How do we know? What was the clue that it was the consumers?
Because it's consumer price index.
Because it's the consumer price index. Well done. Yes, absolutely. And as silly as that sounds, that's a good question to have. All right, so I'm going to stop the sharing because otherwise you'll be able to see. If we want to know if housing has become more or less affordable to people over time, what do we need to know? Have a go, A, B, C, or D. Oh, I need to tell you about housing too. Good work. Interesting. Oh, interesting. This one's a bit more of a challenge. Quite a challenge. Interesting. Have a go, Kendra. Wow. Okay. Well, this one was much less clear. We want to know if housing has become more or less affordable to people over time. What do we need to know? Let's find out. All right, so just go back into the sharing. If we want to know if people housing more or less affordable, what do we need to know? We need to know the change in the purchasing power of the consumers. Interesting. Well done. Now, here we go. Let's start this activity. It's a matching activity. Going to have a series of what did I give you? Minute 30. Right, so there's going to be pairs. You're going to need to try and match the pairs. You've only got a minute 30 to do it, so don't spend a huge amount of time. Starting the activity now. 3, 2, 1, go. Minute 30, come on. Away you go. Match them up. Minute 15 still. Just over a minute. Come on, Kendrick, have a go. 50 seconds. Oh, here we go, getting good now. 30 seconds. Oh, time pressure. 24 seconds. 16 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time's up. Good go, team. Good go. There. 16. All right. Okay. Let's see what you're doing here. Add inflation. All right. That was your increase in the price level. Deflation, decrease in the price level. Disinflation, decrease in the rate of change in prices. Purchasing power, amount we're able to consume. Goods and services wise, real prices, price adjusted, nominal prices, current prices, unadjusted, core inflation, inflation with the removal of the volatile goods, CPI, the index, price level, the average weighted index, to inflate, make it increase, to deflate, to cause it to decrease. Well done, team. All right, now, ladies and gentle beans, I'm going to stop the sharing and jump back to here, back to the meeting. Now, oops, to here. Come on. There we go. So internet was slow. No problem. Yeah, and I don't know why the internet does those sorts of things. It's weird. The internet is weird. All right. Now, here's the thing. The other day, I think it was yesterday. Might have been yesterday. There was a news article that came out it came out in New Zealand. Okay, it's about the New Zealand economy. So yeah, I take an interest. All right. But what was most fascinating for me was it's about monetary policy. Okay. It was about interest rates in New Zealand. All right. Now, one of the things it talked about was the affordability, one of the last questions, the affordability of housing. All right. Well, because affordability of housing in New Zealand has been a real issue and a real concern for, well, probably a good couple of decades at least, if not longer, and particularly at the moment, because we're in this, economic climate, the New Zealand government, everybody a bit concerned. So banks in New Zealand have actually changed their interest rates in order to try, in fact, they've lowered their interest rates in order to try to attract more people to borrow money to buy a house. Okay, so here's my question for you, right? Without looking it up, without asking Dr. Google, what do you think the interest rates for mortgages in New Zealand for buying a house are after they've been just decreased? What do you think the interest rates are? Have a guess. You can chuck it into the comment section. 10%. Well, previously is a difficult question because I haven't lived there for 10 years. 10, 11 years. All right. 4%, when house is 4%, 3%. All right. Question was, what do you think the current interest rates are for mortgages on houses in New Zealand without looking it up on Dr. Google? All right. Just having a guess, 3.79%. Okay. Giraffe, 2%. 7%. Interesting. Well, I can tell you, some of you are very, very close, right? The interest rate that the banks are now charging for a mortgage, right? So that's the borrowing of money, huge amounts of money, because it's in New Zealand and everything's expensive, to buy a house. So to put it in context, the average house price in Auckland is about $1 million New Zealand, which you'd need to multiply by about 4 to get Malaysian ringgit. That's the average house price. So what you'd need to do is to earn, how much would you need to earn? You'd need to be earning probably close to 200,000 New Zealand dollars a year in order to be able to effectively afford to get a mortgage to buy a house like that, right? However, because they've dropped the interest rates, maybe you can get one if you aren't earning that much. So what have they dropped the interest rate to? Well, yes, some of you really close. Giraffe is probably the closest. Having a look. Yeah, Ariane, you were close too. And Arena, you were close. 1.79%. 1.79%. There are a couple of banks offering mortgage rates of 1.8, 1.85, but the most recent round was, I think it was 1.78 or 1.79%. 1%, 1.79%. All right. The expansionary effect of that should, in theory, be quite dramatic. Right. To give you an example that is, familiar to us, the mortgage rate we had when we were in New Zealand, on the house we had in New Zealand, was 5%. Okay. So to put that in context, if the mortgage rate we had was 5%, and if they were to drop that to 1.7%, we would have saved thousands of dollars. Okay. Right. So that is very expansionary. That's quite a dramatic thing for them to do. As to whether it will be effective, right? Because there's a shortage of land to put housing. There's a shortage of people with the money to even be able to afford it at that sort of level. And they're actually restricting that interest rate to first-time buyers as well. They're putting like little requirements on it. So it's to try and enable people to get access into the housing market, to stop them being rental consumers into being actual purchasers, owners, right? It was also one of the things that I said to you before about the CPI that I always found quite amusing, because in the New Zealand CPI, they include rental cost, right, for a house as part of the CPI, because it's part of your expenditure. But because some people own houses, they also have to include the cost of paying a mortgage. So they've got both of those into CPI, even though most people are either one or the other. They have to have both. Right? It's like in the consumption, the different types of goods you might consume that other people may not. So you might not consume makeup, somebody else might consume makeup, but because on average somebody consumes makeup is in the basket. That's sort of an idea. So I have always found it, as I said to you the other day, I have always found it quite fascinating as to what is in the CPI and what isn't. Right? So here's my challenge to you now. Obviously, you're going to need to review all of your understanding of the CPI, how it works, the different types of inflation or different measures of inflation, how that all works, right, and the actual calculations, etc., that are within it. Right, that's a big thing to be reviewing. But also have a look at the basket. So it depends very much on the country you want to look at. So if you're looking at the UK, their basket is going to be different from the US. Right, there will be similarities. If you're looking at New Zealand, similarities. But if you're looking, say, at Malaysia, it would be quite interesting to see what is in the Malaysian CPI basket, right? And then maybe do a comparison, because we've got developing country and developed country. What's in the CPI basket in a developed country? One that you might be familiar with. And that may not interest you, right? But it does interest me. And it also gives you the window into consumption patterns, because remember, that's what that CPI basket is all about. So if there are changes to that basket, then it's an indicator, a reflector of the changes to the consumption patterns. And it could be the quality of the goods, it could be the technology, it could be just the actual consumption pattern changing in and of itself over time. And as we correctly mentioned the other day, we can't be 100% sure that when those corrections happen and those changes happen, that they're actually going to happen in time. I mean, just the speed at which technology changes. The CPI can't possibly keep up with that. Right? There's a new cell phone out or a new computer out every other year. Well, they don't actually adjust the CPI and the basket and the weightings. They don't adjust those. I think it's once every 5 years, okay, when they do. So by that point, everything is all changed and all different. And there'll be some goods that will just be completely irrelevant and aren't included anymore, and others that you now need to include. And so that all changes. It also brings up your TOK questions about the relevance of the information again, because how do you do a longitudinal study, okay, with CPI data? because all of those the basket of goods over the last 5 years, right, and then 10 years, 15 years, it's all changed. It's all different. Okay, so the technology that was around 15 years ago, very different from the technology that's around today, and the goods and services that we use. You know? So is the inflation on those significant, right? Or over time, should we just be focused on the inflation at the moment? Is there any point in a longitudinal study of inflation? So these are all good TOK-based discussions that you can possibly have. The other thing that would be interesting, was interesting to me, and again, might be of interest to you, is there are things online, I can probably find a link, but you can find them, called inflation calculators. And what inflation calculators do is you can plug into them the price of a good or service, and you can actually then see, based on inflation rates, historical inflation rates, how expensive things used to be in the past. All right, so if you want to know how expensive it was to buy a car back in the day when your parents were young, you're able to use an inflation calculator to figure that out. And there's lots of them. They're depending on which country and the like that you're wanting to look at. There could be a whole range of different things that you could see with regards to it, because each inflation calculator obviously is going to be based on the historical data of the country that's being used. So that's another possible interesting addition to what you could look at, right? So things to do, right? Reviewing the key terms and understandings, calculations, critical thinking about the model and about the uses and applications of the model of the CPI, right? Particularly with regards to inflation. Looking at the actual basket itself, what is in the basket, doing a bit of a country comparison to see what differences there are, and having a look at an inflation calculator. You don't have to do a lot with that, but having a little bit of a look at an inflation calculator just to see, just to have out of interest, what has happened to prices of goods and services, maybe ones that you're familiar with over time, and just to see the inflation effects on those, because then you can start thinking obviously about purchasing power and real prices, etc. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording and just say, hey Corneta, thank you very much for today and your work. I will post that information into the classroom. I will also post the recording of the lesson into the classroom, but please have a break, go outside, run around, stretch your arms and legs and go, roar, right? It's important to do something a bit physical, stay away from the screen for a little bit, have a bit of a break before your next lesson, all right? And as always, because we're distance learning, it's a bit harder to do the asking of the questions. So one of the things that I have said at Parent-Teacher-Learner Conference Night was please make sure that if you are having questions that you're sourcing the answers to it either from each other, from online, from the websites that I have provided, the slides, or even myself, right? Send me an email, okay? Otherwise, as we'd say in the land of my birth, I said, hey, Corneta, have a fantastic day and a good weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, David.
Bye.